So in this next section in recreational health, we're focusing on the great outdoors, which could include time that is spent hiking or camping, or maybe just in the backyard or visiting the neighborhood park. And we're going to focus some on the different types of pests and some of the diseases that they might transmit, as well as when you're camping, some kind of food safety and sun safety responsible behaviors. So what to do and what not to do. Well, one of the major things of not to do, and this is a big risk factor for when people may even go to the beach, or they camp out, or they grill out, or they hike, especially if you're doing it overnight or for long periods of time, is don't eat undercooked meat products. So undercooked meat products can cause a lot of problems for folks when they come back, as well as maybe even in that day or two while they're out. Also, we don't want to share our food. So when we are around wildlife or even our pets, we don't want to have situations where animals could potentially get into the food, get into the potato chips, or get into the whatever at night while people might be sleeping in a tent or something, only to be able for that person the next morning to be exposed. Or when animals got to get on the utensils and things like that, a person could potentially ingest some of the pathogens that a wild animal may be carrying. And also we have to be careful when we hand feed even our own pets, that our hands may get contaminated and we have to be ready to clean them. We also have to create environments where animals are not going to be kind of moseying about where we're going to be staying. So some animals can be rabid. They can also carry with them a variety of pathogens. When we talk about rabid animals, animals that carry the rabies virus, they're not common. They're not too common, but they're more common than we may desire. So across the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and Dr. John Poe, who was our state public health veterinarian, who he has since passed away, there's an award that our state association gives out in his honor, but Dr. Poe would do roadkill survey sampling and also samples that were submitted to him regarding bats. And as you look around the state here, this was some of the more recent work that he had done before he passed. But in 2012, there were positive samples around the state. Here's Madison County, but all to the south of us, several counties had positive rabies tests. Many counties in the state had not had positive rabies tests. So the types of animals where the rabies tests typically come up the most are from skunks and bats, occasionally raccoons. Thankfully, we don't see rabid dogs or rabid cats all too often in Kentucky. That's very rare, actually, to see a rabid dog or cat. But bats are notorious for carrying rabies. So, it's one that we have to be mindful of. So if we have a bat exposure, if we get scratched or come into contact with a bat, you should see a medical care provider as soon as possible and consider starting the 3-dose rabies vaccine. So we want to make good decisions. And the number one good decision that we often can make, if we're going to be eating when we're in the great outdoors, is to make sure that our foods are kept in waterproof bags so that they don't leak onto the other foods. We also have to keep things cold. If we don't keep things cold, our food can act like a petri dish, and microorganisms that could have come off our hands and got into the food then have an opportunity to grow and replicate. We should also wash our hands often and use hand sanitizer if water is not available. And hand sanitizer itself is only effective when you have your hands free of dirt. So if you don't have soap available, try to use water or something to get the actual grimy stuff off your hands. And then the hand sanitizer with the alcohol, don't dry your hands off. Allow the alcohol to evaporate off. That sticky, wet feeling that comes with hand sanitizer, it's there for a reason. And once it goes away, you're good. We shouldn't dry it off. It's there because it provides sufficient kill time to kill the microorganisms. Now, when people are in the great outdoors and they're cooking, they have to remember to keep the raw foods separate from prepared foods. So the raw foods can touch and can contaminate the good food that you're wanting to eat, and cook foods to the proper temperatures. So when food's not chilled properly, microorganisms can grow, and we don't want microorganisms growing, or if we put them back. And so there's a lot of problems with people sometimes not keeping their food cold. And then when we cook the food, we should cook it again to the proper temperature. So I'm going to pull up some information from our temperature guides. So safe minimum cooking temperatures versus what you might see from a grill. And then you see here on this one, rare 125, medium rare 135. So when you're looking at steaks and stuff like that, these particular temperatures are high risk. And if they're whole cuts of meat, it's not as bad. But for ground beef, it's particularly dangerous to eat beef that's cooked at those low of temperatures. So the food safety guidelines for the United States, you can download them as a PDF file. I've got them here. When we look at beef, ground beef should be cooked to 160. Ground turkey and ground chicken, 165 Fahrenheit. With regards to whole pieces of beef, 145, so steaks and things like that. But poultry, 165. And when in doubt, cook it hotter, 165. So if you're camping out, making eggs and things like that, you want stuff up to temperature, because we don't want to be getting sick while we're hiking or on a vacation, because it'll ruin the vacation for everybody. So beef should be, again, 160. All right, moving on. We don't want to take the bugs home with us either. So when we come home from camping or from whatever, it might take 2 to 5 days for a bacterial infection to get established, sometimes longer. So you may get sick from eating those foods and may not really appreciate when it happened. So we also want to keep the food secure to keep out animals. So there's ways of keeping your food secure so that bears and raccoons and stuff don't get into it. So there's things like this bear keg. There's containers that help keep bears out of getting into people's food. Also, in like the Red River Gorge, there's signage about how to keep your food away from bears so you don't attract them to your site. So here's the information about camping in bear country. Choose your kitchen. It should be at least 200 feet away from trails and any water source, so the water also attracts bears. Store any smellable items like sunscreen and toothpaste and food wrappers in your kind of kitchen space that you've set up away from your tent. Store your food in a bear canister and keep it dangling at least 10 feet off the ground so that the bears can't get to it. So you want to keep that area where you're eating away from where you're sleeping so you don't have to have an encounter with it, because this will attract them. And then you also want to keep it, again, at least 10 feet off the ground, and you want to stay away from water because that will attract the bears. If we're staying in like a cabin or a camping area that's got like enclosed structures, especially in the Southwest United States, we don't want to sweep up rodent droppings either. So the rodent droppings can sometimes carry a virus called the hantavirus. So we want to watch out for that. So I'm going to show you a video on the hantavirus. And before I show you the video on the hantavirus, I just want to read this. So, this hantavirus pulmonary syndrome is rare. From 1993, when hantavirus was first identified in the U.S., there have been 87 cases in California and over 700 cases nationally. And about 12% of deer mice carry this. So it's relatively common in deer mice. And then in the particular Southwest, like at Yosemite, and the guy who's the public health service officer in charge at Yosemite is an alumnus of our program, George Carroll. So when we look at this, you can see that the deer mouse is found throughout most of the United States.